Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Fresno Art Museum's Winter-Spring Exhibition Season 2025. I'm Michelle Ellis-Tracy, and I'm the Executive Director and Chief Curator at the Fresno Art Museum. Thank you to those in our community who supported our exhibition season totally or specifically chose one exhibition to support. We couldn't do this without you. We've always relied on our sponsors from Fresno and the region to help us mount our exhibitions. And so we're very grateful for your help, and we are posting your names and which exhibitions you're supporting on the screen this afternoon. We also would like to thank Measure Key Project Grant, who is supporting our Keller collection of African American prints. I wrote a separate grant for that, and so we are very thrilled that paid for the exhibition's traveling exhibition fee, and also for us to host a number of events related to this exhibition throughout the course of its 6-month run. So we're very thrilled with the City of Fresno, and you with your tax contributions are helping us that way also this season. On the stage today, we have Sarah Vargas, who is our curator at the Fresno Art Museum. We have Michael Asbor, who is the painter in the Pixels exhibition, and Michael F. Rohde, who's the weaver in the Pixels exhibition, and Tony Natsulas, who is the clay sculptor from the Sacramento area. So with that, I would like to turn this over to Sarah Vargas, who will introduce Michael Asbor.
Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. As Michelle said, my name is Sarah Vargas, and I'm the curator here at the Fresno Art Museum. Michelle and I co-curated the Pixels exhibition, and we have two artists in this two-person show. That makes sense, right? Michael Asbor is the first artist that I'm going to introduce to you. His part of the Pixels exhibition is Image as Mythology, Contemporary Paintings. So this exhibition as a whole examines the idea of taking something that we associate with the digital age, being a pixel, and how it is interpreted in other mediums, and how it affects what we see and how we interpret the world. So I'd like to invite Michael Asbor up here.
Thank Sarah for Sarah Vargas for the introduction, and Michelle Ellis Prophecy as well for inviting me to exhibit, and everybody here at the Fresno Art Museum on the work here, and everybody here who's joining us today. Thank you for coming. I'd like to talk a little bit about my work, starting off by talking about our prevailing view. Is that we live in an objective reality, and although our experience is subjective, the underlying reality does not change. So for example, an oak tree is the same oak tree regardless of our experience with it. We might approach it at different perspectives, perceiving it differently. However, the tree does not change. It's the same tree. We tend to perceive a photograph as a realistic representation of the outside world. The fact is that photographs are a gross distortion of reality, which is not frozen but constantly changing. The depiction of a subject through a photograph creates the illusion that there is an objective reality, where in fact those who are present in one location at the same time each experience it in a different way. In 2019, I began the Perceptualism series. The concept had much to do with the viewer's role in interpreting a painting. So in this series, the viewer's perception of the piece was paramount. The story that was formed during the viewing of the piece was necessary for its completion. So I intentionally left paintings unfinished, revealing history of multiple layers, and applied paint as expressive brushstrokes, which demonstrated the artist's actions. In this way, the viewer could step in, recreate the process through their experience, and develop their own interpretation based on their individual perception. In other words, no single understanding is more valuable than others. All interpretations are valid. The most recent series, Pixels, Image as Mythology, culminated with the works exhibited here in the Fresno Art Museum. Some of these paintings include large portions of prominent figures from our history. Their contributions to society lay the foundation to what we might consider contemporary mythology. There are a couple pieces that were done before the show. Portrait of Martin Luther King as a symbol of democratization in our country and a martyr of freedom. Portrait of Albert Einstein as a symbol of intellectual genius carrying the human race a great leap forward. Turning to the work exhibited here, Portrait of Frida Kahlo paying tribute to a symbolic figure representing female strength who prevails despite suffering. And the portrait of Pablo Picasso. This portrait of a young Picasso, inspired by a Man Ray photograph, pays tribute to the artist whose work catalyzed my own shift from science to art during my late teens at UC San Diego. His revolutionary approach, manipulating formal elements through cubism and abstraction, transformed how I saw painting. Though the mythology around him has evolved, his personal life now casting a shadow over his genius. However, his artistic triumphs remain foundational to my own path as an artist. That's the truth. I'll turn to the piece of Sandro Botticelli's Birth of Venus, which is based on that emblematic Renaissance painting, this is the original here, which first captivated me in my preteens, not for its realism, which does not have the precision of the later artistic movements, but for its symbolic retelling of ancient mythology. When I later traveled to Florence to see the Birth of Venus in person, I observed that by depicting these stories in an original way, Botticelli reinterpreted the ancient myths in a hand that was both unique and representative of the Italian Renaissance sensibilities, thereby reforming the mythology. My effort, here's the homage that I created for this show. My effort in creating this homage to Botticelli's work, there were two objectives. First, to honor Botticelli's inventive genius by crafting a work that, while not of the same caliber, aspires to do justice to his masterpiece. And second, to portray the ancient mythological themes depicted in the Renaissance work which it had been inspired by, in a new light. By using pixelation, expressive brushstrokes, abstraction, revealing historical layers through transparency and other means, I invite the viewer into the painting process. My goal with this piece, as with all of my work, was to create a painting that would last generations, knowing that the perception of the work would change over time. And finally, the self-portrait, which I leave us with, is a depiction of myself captured in a photograph that depicted my physical features from a specific perspective at a single moment in time. Yet just as society's perception of individuals evolves with each generation, so does the mythology that surrounds us all. Like the viewer who contemplates, or rather completes, an artwork through their gaze, we each shape our own reality through perception. We are not merely observing the world, we are actively painting and redefining it with our every glance. Thank you.
introducing the second artist who is part of the two-person Pixels exhibition, weaver Michael F. Rohde. I've known Michael for probably 15 years, as he was in Ventura County when I was at the Ojai Valley Museum, and we went to many of the same openings together. I didn't get to exhibit him until my Fiber Art Masterworks large group show here in 2016. And when Michael Asbro presented us with his pixelated paintings, I immediately thought of Michael Rohde's work where he pixelates major figures in the art and iconographic world. So Michael Rohde pursued dual careers in biochemistry and weaving. Michael Rohde left behind his job as a professional research lab person in 1998 to devote his time full-time to weaving. And he has done a number of series. His work is exquisite, and I am delighted to show him in this way this time around. His formal training in drawing, color, and design came from the Glasgow School of the Arts at the museum in Houston. Over the years, Michael has taught, conducted lectures and workshops, as well as juried exhibitions. He's exhibited his work in many local, national, international, juried, and invitational exhibitions. So with that, I would love to introduce Michael Rohde to talk with you about his work.
I mumble, so I will try to bend over to the microphone so you can hear me.
Raise it up.
Yeah.
Try to fall out. Mr. Tall. How's that?
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michelle and Sarah, and I'm honored to be amongst these other two exquisite gentlemen in their artwork, and happy to have you all here. So, Michelle referred a little bit to how I got into this rather unusual art medium of weaving, and I guess I need to get that out of the way. How did I get started? Well, I had seen someone wearing a hand-woven shirt, and I thought, how was that done? So it was curiosity. Well, that shirt never got made, which is probably just as well. But being a man in what is predominantly a field populated by women, I sort of gravitated toward weaving rugs, and I did that for a long time. And then at some point when I was selling these rugs and they wound up on the walls, my gallery dealer said, well, you should be doing tapestry instead of rugs because they're all going on the walls instead of the floor. So I did that, and that was one of the pivotal changes in how I approached what I was doing with my art, because all of a sudden I was no longer doing things based on designs that looked like they would be appropriate for, but I started with ideas. Some of the early works I did were political. They were making commentary on wars that were going on, and I could probably still be doing that, but I said enough about that. So, the way the approach to pixels started with me as I began thinking about pixels because I've always worked with digital media and things like that. So one of the first things I did was a photograph I had taken of a sunset in India and rendered that in pixels, but I didn't really have the right range of colors for it. It wasn't terribly successful. The second round was a show at the Textile Museum in Washington, D.C., where they invited us as the artists that were exhibiting, to consider green, the color and the cause, environmental issues. So my thought on that was, well, let's think about where would those two come together in a way that I could weave it. So I went into a Google Map program, zeroed in on the rainforest in Brazil, found a region that looked appropriate, and I could weave it, and so I did it as a series similar to what we're seeing in the hallway. The curator later encouraged me. She said, are you going to do more with pixels? And so I said, okay, well, maybe I should try faces. So So that's what I did. So I will take a photograph, sometimes one that I have taken, sometimes one that I've sourced from other places, the internet quite frequently is a source. And then I will reduce that in Photoshop to something that's 20 pixels wide. The first few that I did were from my own photographs from travel, and that got me started. Then I started thinking about things that had a little bit more of a social commentary, let's put it that way. So I thought about thought leaders, people who had influenced me, as Michael did, Martin Luther King, Eleanor Roosevelt, Dalai Lama, Nelson Mandela, and others. And then another curator friend of mine, Joe Laurie, said, well, you've got all your heroes out there, where are the heroines? So the first ones that I approached were I sort of came at it through the art side, and so I did one from a Picasso painting and from the blue period because I wanted to do something in blue lines. I did the one of Frida Kahlo, which is here, and then I did one from a Degas painting at the Moulin Rouge, where the face was in rather unusual colors. And then I decided that it was time to start working with other people, other thought leaders. So at some point I realized that I probably finished as many as I was interested in doing, and then one of the school shootings happened at Parkland, Florida, which was horrific, of course. And then what stirred me to think again about another case was one of the students that became quite an outspoken spokesman for the group of students who things. And so she is in the exhibit that you'll see out there. So my goal in presenting these things is not just to have a gimmick, but to make people look and to think. So when I put titles on them, I don't put titles on them that reveal who it is. And so I invite you to look at them, think about who that might be, and then answer your questions. I will tell you one of the most amusing responses I got to that challenge was a man at the exhibit in San Luis Obispo. He looked at the weaving of Frida Kahlo, which is the easiest one to recognize, and said, "That's Margaret Thatcher, isn't it?" So it's been fun and engaging. I'm happy to be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. The last artist sitting in the row is Tony Natsulis, who is a funk art clay sculptor based in Sacramento, California. He is a direct second generation from the original lineage, including Robert Artisan and Peter Volkus, Viola Fry, and his work is stupendous. We spent some time together down at Clayhan's studio this afternoon. They hosted him for a talk, and it was very revealing. I learned a lot in that hour, and I will let him talk about it, but it was fabulous. I'm very thrilled to introduce Tony to the Fresno region. I think being a Bay Area based arts person, I have tended to bring Bay Area art to Fresno, and I think it's very special when that happens because this is an alive place, and that is an alive place, and so many things started there that are known as West Coast art. Natsulis' work has been featured in galleries and are part of permanent collections in over 16 museums worldwide. His talent is recognized by California institutions such as the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art and the Crocker Art Museum in Sacramento. He has received numerous awards and honors throughout his career, including being named by the Smithsonian as one of the top 100 craft artists in the United States in 2004. So I'm not sure if Sarah was aware, but once the museum was mounted with all of this artwork and we were able to peruse each gallery, there is a thread that is common among all of these artists, and that is portraiture. And they are all heralding in their own medium and in their own expression heroes that can be artists, they can be scientists, they can be other politically important people on the world stage. And Tony's exhibition is called Artist Heroes. And so every one of these artists is heralding that this season, and it's a wonderful thread throughout all of the very distinct exhibitions. So Tony, please come up.
Thank you, Michelle, for allowing me to show my work here. It's an honor. It's great. And the staff is amazing here. Best staff I've ever worked with. So I kind of represent the ancient part of making art. These guys are doing digital stuff. I'm working with mud. So we have a yin and a yang here. Like Michelle says, this is a part of a series I'm doing of artists that I absolutely have a huge amount of respect. There's 3 of them in here that are new and 3 that are not so new. But the 3 new ones are people that are very famous, but what I decided to do is concentrate on what they actually do when they're not playing music or singing or, I guess basically performing. I did a portrait of Josephine Baker, who was a spy in World War II. She was a pilot. She spoke at the March on Washington. She adopted 12 kids from around the world. She's just an amazing person, and I had no idea. I always thought, oh, she's just a burlesque dancer. So my eyes were completely open. She's incredible. I did a portrait of Annie Lennox, who not only has a foundation for helping women and girls around the world that are being oppressed and harmed, but she got a medal for going down to South Africa and helping them try to cure the AIDS epidemic down there. And then I did a portrait of Carlos Santana, who has also a foundation for helping children around the world that are in need. So, yes, I'm doing famous people, but I'm trying to show this whole other side of them that is altruistic, that's just, I'm just always amazed by what they're doing. They're just not stupid rock stars just singing along. They're actually doing stuff in the world. It's quite wonderful. The other portraits are just people that I love. You know, they just, they did some important things, but not like these 3. So, anyway, I'd be happy to talk more when we're in the gallery if you want to ask. Thank you very much.
And when you go into Tony's show, there are QR codes on the primary item labels. So hopefully you have a QR code scanner, because he's written very lengthy and rich label copy for each piece. And even if you can't get to tonight, I hope you come back, which is why we have 6-month exhibition seasons, so you come back more than once. And now I would like to introduce Sarah Vargas, who has handheld the Harmon and Harriet Kelly collection of African American art, works on paper. We don't typically just pay for a show and bring it in and stick it on the wall. We very carefully read all the label copy. We make sure spelling is correct. We're not quite sure who curated the show. It's not necessarily the place that is generating the rental. So Sarah took great care in cleaning up a lot of things that were not correct, and she rewrote a lot of label copy. So I want to commend her for taking this exhibition to the place where it belongs and with the scholarship it deserves. And so I'll let her talk about the exhibition. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Let's adjust this. I'm much shorter. Don't want it to fall. collection is one of the largest and most comprehensive traveling exhibitions featuring works on paper by African American artists from the 19th to the 21st centuries. There is a total of 65 works in the exhibition by 51 artists, encompassing the mediums of drawing, etching, lithography, watercolor, pastels, acrylic, wash, block printing, and color screen printing. This is but a fraction of the Kelly's total collection. So Jacob Lawrence, the first African American artist to have his work acquired by the Museum of Modern Art in New York, stated in 1943, "I do not look upon the story of blacks in America as a separate experience to the American culture, but as a part of the American heritage and experience as a whole. This exhibition encompasses a great deal of modern American history." The earliest work in this exhibition is by Grafton Tyler Brown from 1878. Brown was one of the earliest documented graphic artists on the West Coast and the first African American artist to create works depicting California and the Pacific Northwest. Much of the artistic activity was influenced by the Great Migration, one of the largest movements of people in U.S. history, when 6 million black people moved from the American South to northern, midwestern, and western states between 1910 and 1970. The northeast Manhattan neighborhood of Harlem, which covered just 3 square miles, drew nearly 175,000 African Americans, giving the neighborhood the highest concentration of black people in the country. Prior to the Great Migration, more than 90% of African Americans lived in the American South. While these shifting demographics caused pockets of culture and creativity to develop, Harlem is the great example. It became a destination for African Americans of all backgrounds, and it drew some of the greatest minds and brightest talents of the day. The black population of Harlem was 10% in 1910. By 1920, it was 30%. By 1930, it was 70%. This dense population of creatives led to one of the greatest and most influential cultural periods in U.S. history, the Harlem Renaissance. Artists associated with the movement asserted pride in black life and identity, a rising consciousness of inequality and discrimination, and an interest in the rapidly changing modern world. For many, it was their first time experiencing freedom of expression through the arts. The movement extended far beyond New York City to places such as Chicago, Cleveland, and Los Angeles, all cities shaped by the Great Migration. Between the end of World War I and the United States entry in World War II, so roughly 1918 to the end of 1941, these artists and writers produced one of the most significant eras of cultural expression in our nation's history. Among the Harlem Renaissance artists included in this show are Aaron Douglas, John T. Biggers, Romare Bearden, and Jacob Lawrence. The graphic arts also played a groundbreaking role at Cleveland's Karamu House. Initially founded as a settlement house in 1915, Karamu House became one of the best-known sites for Black American culture. Although noted today for its theater program, the community center housed a printmaking workshop beginning in the 1930s, where artists and community members alike could experiment with various techniques, playing on printmaking's fundamental accessibility and democracy. This exploration led to the foundation of Karamu Artists Incorporated, a group that counted among its members some of the most recognized Black printmakers of the WPA era. It was also a major contributor to the Harlem Renaissance. The name Karamu House comes from the Swahili word meaning a place of joyful gathering. Some of the Karamu artists represented here are Elmer Brown, William E. Smith, and Charles Louis Saleh Jr. A large majority of the works in this exhibition were created during the 1930s and 1940s, during the Great Depression and is part of the Works Progress Administration's federal art project. The Works Project Administration, better known as the WPA, was an agency of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal, the program for economic stimulation to help the country recover during the Great Depression. Established in 1935, the agency, which was originally the Works Progress Administration, was renamed the Works Project Administration in 1939. It's very confusing. Just call it the WPA. It employed millions of job seekers to carry out public works projects, including the construction of public buildings and roads. So the Federal Art Project, which ran from 1935 to 1943, was a program within the WPA created to fund the visual arts in the United States. It was a relief measure to employ artists and artisans to create murals, easel paintings, sculpture, graphic art, posters, photography, theater scenic design, and arts and crafts. The Federal Art Project employed around 10,000 artists during the Great Depression and established more than 100 community art centers throughout the country. The WPA artists represented here include Robert Blackburn, Ernest Critchlow, Rex Gorley, Doc Scratch, Charles White, and again Jacob Lawrence. Perhaps the most influential African-American graphic artist of the 20th century was Robert H. Blackburn, who is also considered the leading lithographer of his generation. In 1947, Blackburn opened the printmaking workshop, originally out of his apartment and studio in Chelsea, before moving into a warehouse space in New York City. The printmaking workshop hosted classes, held an open studio working area, and print shops where artists could experiment. He worked with many different artists in the printmaking workshops over 50 years of operation, including many represented here in this exhibition, such as Ron Adams, Elizabeth Catlett, Charles White, John Vickers, Benny Andrews, and Romare Bearden. A number of these artists also studied, worked, and lived internationally. Henry O. Tanner attended the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philadelphia and was mentored by realist painter Thomas Eakins. In 1891, he immigrated to Europe and settled in Paris, where he remained for the rest of his life. He was a prominent presence in the Paris art scene and mentored many other younger African-American artists who came to study in Paris. The first painting by an African-American artist to be added to the White House's permanent collection was a work by Henry O. Tanner, acquired in 1996. Several of these artists, such as Elizabeth Catlett, Charles White, Lawrence Arthur Jones, and John Woodrow Wilson, studied in Mexico at a Mexico City-based workshop called Taller de Gráfica Popular, also known as TGP. This workshop created prints, posters, and illustrated publications that were popular, affordable, and politically topical. The workshop welcomed a number of foreign members and guest artists, as well as collaborating with the WPA projects. The 1960s gave birth to the politically motivated and African-inspired art of the Civil Rights era. Elizabeth Catlett, especially, was known for her work that explored race, gender, and class. The collection also includes work from the late 20th and early 21st century artists, most notably, to us at least, Alison Saar, daughter of the Fresno Art Museum's Council 100 Distinguished Woman Artist for 1993, Betty Saar, as she's best known, of course. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the collectors because what they've done is truly remarkable. Harmon and Harriet Kelly founded the Harmon and Harriet Kelly Collection of African American Art in their home in San Antonio, Texas, which in 1995 became the first private African American art collection exhibited at a Smithsonian museum. The Kellys began collecting after seeing an exhibition of African American art at the San Antonio Museum of Art in 1986. They realized they knew next to nothing about the artists, and they wanted to learn more. And so the collection was born. Harmon, a doctor, and Harriet, a teacher with a science background, had no real knowledge of art before starting this venture. But they learned quickly, and they dedicated themselves to building one of the country's premier collections. In 2019, the San Antonio Arts Commission honored Harriet Kelly with the Distinction in the Arts Award for Arts Patronage, recognizing her outstanding arts and cultural achievements. Harmon Kelly passed away in January of 2023, but the foundation continues with the work of Harriet and their two daughters. So as you go into the gallery, you may notice that the lighting is a little dimmer than usual. This is because the works are delicate and the ink and paper are prone to fading. This means long-term exhibition can actually be kind of dangerous for these works. And so for that reason, per the contract for this exhibition, the light levels in the gallery are a little dim. So please excuse our light. But we are so thankful to be able to host this exhibition in Fresno. We want to thank Landau Traveling Exhibitions, which organized the show. I'd also like to acknowledge that this exhibition is underwritten by the City of Fresno Measure P Expanded Access to the Arts and Culture Fund, administered by the Fresno Arts Council. So thank you very much for listening to me.
And that concludes our artist curator talk for this evening. The bar is open, hors d'oeuvres will be passed. The artists will be in their respective locations in the museum. So feel free to go up and ask some questions one-on-one. The acoustics are not great in here, so we don't do that in here. We do it out there. So enjoy your night, celebrate with us, and thank you everybody for participating in this evening.